Hi, thank you so much for setting this up. It's good to see interest here. One thing I like to do to start off is to give you a little bit of background about why we started this program, so you kind of get an understanding of what motivated us to be a part of this and to grow this program into why we thought it was a necessity to put together, and why it's also grown to be so successful over the last number of years. By way of background, I should like to tell a little story to start you off. In a prior life, so to speak, I was the chief of staff for the New York State Senate Majority Leader. So in a sense, I was a high-ranking staff member in the legislature, and groups that wanted to advocate on behalf of whatever issues mattered wanted to get meetings with myself, the leader, or other people in leadership. And getting those kind of meetings, time is only so infinite there. So there was a major Jewish organization, doesn't matter which one, who came to us and wanted to meet with me about a particular issue of Jewish communal concern. And when they met with me, they were pitching their issue, and it was an important issue for the Jewish community at that point. And they said to me, "Do you think we can get the Senate Majority Leader of the Senate to support us on this particular issue?" And I said, "I think I can convince the Senate Majority Leader to support this issue." And they were very happy. And then they asked me, "So what else do you think you can do?" And I said to them, "Well, I think I can probably get the senator to write a strongly worded letter, on behalf of the Senate Majority Leader supporting that issue, so you can see that it's in writing and you have it, and you can do what you want with it." And they thought that I was the best thing since sliced bread, offering them that and being so accommodating on their issue. Also having a friendly face, from their community who was in such a position, who they knew understood what they were talking about on a firsthand basis. They left the meeting, walking on air, thinking that they've accomplished the world. So I walk into the private office of the Senate Majority Leader, and we're sitting and chatting and catching up, and he goes, "Oh, so who did you meet with?" And I mentioned the group. And he goes, "What did they want?" I said, "They wanted to ask me to convince you to support this and this issue." And he sees me with a little smirk on my face, and we had been working together for many years, so we had a camaraderie and a relationship. And he looks at me like I'm crazy, and he goes to me, "Didn't we go public supporting that issue like 3 weeks ago?" And I said, "That's why I didn't think it'd be too hard to convince you." And he goes, "So what'd they ask for?" I said, "Nothing." I said, "What do you mean they asked for nothing? They came up to Albany and they asked for nothing after all this?" I said, "What do you mean to tell you? They asked for nothing." And he goes, "So what'd you tell them?" I said, "I thought I can get you to write a strongly worded letter supporting the issue on their behalf." And I'm saying this with a kind of smirk like I'm having now. And he looks at me like I'm crazy again. And he goes, "Didn't we do like 3 of those in the last 4 days for different organizations that are circulating all over the place?" I said, "Yeah, it's a cut and paste job. I didn't really think it would be much of a challenge to get you to do it." And he goes, "All right, next." Now, what that story tells you is a few things. It tells you, first of all, we only as a Jewish community get so many opportunities to speak to the highest levels of government, or to get access to government, or to get access to be able to move things. And we can't waste them. And in a situation like that, you saw that there were certain basic things, such as doing your homework on an issue, seeing, the fact that when you come to an issue like that, to understand the jurisdiction of the people that you're asking, something that you're coming before, seeing what they theoretically can offer, what you should specifically ask for, the strategies of how do you ask in a way where they have to give you a definitive answer to actually move the ball forward on that issue or not. And all those are skills that are not innate. They're skills that you have to learn. We recognize also, and the other thing there is that when we were talking about it in the Majority Leader's office afterwards, it shows us that, can we trust this organization in the future? Because if we see somebody that doesn't do their homework, doesn't understand where the world is at, hasn't kept tabs on critical happenings and movements on issues as they're coming to pitch them, and that we knew better than they did on where they were on the issue that they were themselves trying to get us to move on, how can we trust them on any other issue? So what that means is the next time around, they're not getting a leader with the chief of staff. They're getting a meeting, maybe not on an urgent level, maybe with a lower level staff member, if at all. Maybe we're not taking them so seriously next time. So we realize we can't afford, as a Jewish community, to allow for that to be the case. We have to take advantage of every opportunity. We have to be trusted. We have to make sure we know what we're doing. We have to have the skills necessary to do it. Just to come in and say, we have the side of right, and that what we want is altruistic, doesn't actually move anybody, because every single entity and every single advocacy point and every single advocacy group, says the same thing, that they're right, what they're doing is indispensable, and leaders are hearing that all day. So how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we distinguish ourselves to make sure that we have an impact, and that we can move the needle on the issues that are of Jewish communal concern? So we came. So at Wiesenthal 8 years ago, we scoured the earth to see, who was teaching these kind of lessons, right? And we looked at, there's plenty of incredible organizations teaching about anti-Semitism, about supporting Israel, about these kinds of things. So we have a real incredible understanding of these kind of things. And but part of the issue is we didn't really see many programs or really that taught the how, the skills necessary, the actual kind of conversations, which maybe some people don't have that experience, or maybe they don't have, or maybe they think they're tough conversations to have in talking about what the real world of government, politics, and advocacy is, and what happens behind the scenes. And what we look at also is whether one day you want to become somebody who works in government or works for a Jewish organization that can be an advocate, or as we know, in each of our communities, whether it's in our shul, whether it's in our school, whether it's wherever that might be, we always know that when there's a crisis that happens, there's that person, whoever that person is, that knows what to do, would know who to talk to, would know how to go about things. But in the next generation, though, we're not having as many of those kinds of people to fill the next generation of leadership. And we one of the things, and the big thing that we look for this program to do is to, over the course of the program, immerse you deeply into that world, show you what that world is really like, not from an academic perspective, but from a real life perspective, to be able to understand, how do you move things in that world? How does it work? What are the conversations that happen there? And how can you become somebody who can understand, how do you really have an impact, for the Jewish communal agenda? Now, granted, these lessons are universal. When you're looking at an academic setting here, those kind of lessons, can help you in anything you want to push. But obviously, our motivation here is to push, for you to be able to use these to push the kind of issues that are of concern to the Jewish world. So, your next logical question would be: so how do we do that, and what does that program look like on a day-to-day basis? So what we look at is first of all, there are 3 parts of the program. The first part is the only way you're going to understand how the elected world works and how government officers think and feel and how their staffs think and feel and who's doing what and how they're going about their business is by being immersed in that environment. So for the duration of the program, your 9 to 5, so to speak, is we place you in the office of a state senator, a city council member, a state assembly member, something of that ilk. And people ask, just basic questions also of, well, what about Congress or this and that? Well, Congress, first of all, ends up having much larger staffs, so you don't get the direct feel. And also, a lot of the issues we're talking about, people always in communities think, well, because I know somebody that's what they believe is a higher rank, that's the place to go to. One of the lessons you learn here, it's not about what you perceive to be higher or lower. It's about understanding who has what jurisdictions. Because you can go to the president of the United States and ask him to fix your pothole. He can't do it. You still have to go to your municipal leader. You can ask them to try to work on planning for building a school. You need the right people. You need to understand that world and understand who's affecting the kind of things and issues that you need on the ground. And also in those offices, they tend to be much smaller offices. So you get to see much more of the action and be much bigger part of the action. So you get to really do real work as opposed to just making copies in a larger office. And to us, it's important because we want you to really be a part of their operation. So we place you in those offices, and and what do you learn from there? First of all, just by being there, you learn the ebb and flow of the office. You learn what are the different staff positions that exist. What does a chief of staff do? What does a press secretary do? What does a constituent service officer do? How do people get on the schedule? How do they define or decide who meets with who? What advocacy groups do? How do they get into the office? What is the conversation around the proverbial water cooler amongst staff once those groups leave? Are they taking them seriously? Are they not taking them seriously? Why are they taking them seriously or not? What are they willing to do? Also understanding by being in those offices, what's their real jurisdiction? What are they capable of? So if you wanted to come back and ask them for something, what are they able to do? What are the appropriate things to ask for different offices? It's also a question of understanding, for instance, we look at one of the big surprises people have a lot of times is, they realize, wow, we didn't realize that they do so much constituent service work. We didn't even knew that component of an office exists. So what does that mean? On how people end up working day to day to help with day-to-day problems that people have, that people go to offices like that to help them on day-to-day issues, whether it's housing, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's helping with their whatever there might be that interacts with state or city agencies, if it's on the city level or state level. But then also it's a question of, well, how do they track asks? How do they recognize problems? So for instance, if you had a problem in the Jewish community and you start having people call in and say, I have a problem with this. Well, how do they track problems? How do they have relationships with those city and state agencies? What are those relationships and how can they effectuate change? So with all of that, it's a question of you can't pick that up. You can't understand that unless you actually live that environment for a period of time. So we provide you that immersive environment and people ask, so what are you working on when you're there? And the answer is whatever they want you to work on because you become part of their team. Because the only way you're going to understand things is if you're part of their team. So that's one component of the program. The second component, which typically people think is their favorite, is that we end up on a weekly basis. We end up having workshops or seminars, as you will. We get around the table, and we end up having different people who are in the business of advocacy on different components and different levels come to speak to you. And these are not necessarily academic people. These are people who in the real world are doing the job now. So what does that mean? It means when we have a seminar on how do you deal with the media and press, everybody says on issues, oh my God, we should get media. It's a great issue. Why wouldn't they cover it? Well, because it doesn't work that way. You get a publisher or an editor of a newspaper or a high-level reporter who is speaking to you and saying, well, this is how you build a relationship with a reporter. This is how you construct a story. This is how you pitch a story. This is how you recognize by checking out our circulation rates, what week would you want to drop that story with us? Whether it's better to pitch us to be on our online version or our digital version, whether looking at who buys our ads, which direction would our business model, go for in terms of what kind of stories would they go for? But all those kind of real-time intricacies that matter in terms of making sure that you understand how to pitch them. For instance, at one point, we have a senior lobbyist come in to tell you, how do you package an issue? How do you put things together like that? How do you understand how that all works? Another week, it's about building intergroup and interfaith alliances and relationships. So, some people think you can just look at another group and say, hey, let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya and it all work out. It's not the real world. The real world is we can't align with everybody and not everybody is appropriate to align with. The question is, how do we see what the value add is for us to another community? What do we see as their value to us? Are the issues that we're working on in general between us and them synergistic to each other? Can we build that kind of relationship? And then how do you build that relationship? Is it limited? Is it full? What does it look like? But these are lessons that need to be learned in how you build all this. So every week it's a different kind of component of advocacy like that. But also equal importance is on a weekly basis, that's your opportunity to be able to meet and spend time with each of your peers in the program because you're all around the table. And part of what you do is you end up each going around the room to start every session and talk about what your week was like. Because you can be working for an assembly person on the Upper West Side of Manhattan and somebody else can be working for an assembly person in Central Brooklyn, which has different demographics, different socioeconomics, different issues of concern, different ways that they approach people, different ways that people approach the office. And you need to learn from each other and recognize that the way that your office is acting is not necessarily the way every office acts. And you get that much more well-rounded view by hearing from your peers and building those relationships. We also make sure that the people in the program represent the full diversity of the Jewish community. Because if you're going to say you represent the Jewish community, you can't go to somebody and say, I represent the Jewish community and we believe X, only to know that the next day they're meeting with somebody else who says the same thing and whose philosophy is incredibly divergent as to what yours is. So the question is we all grow up in our own community, in our own silos. And we have our way that we were brought up to believe in certain things, and we should believe in the way we believe. But we should also understand that there is diversity of Jewish thought, and we should be able to just hear out each other and have those conversations so we have an actual understanding of what everybody's thinking. We understand what the field looks like out there. So we might be able to say to somebody, I represent a portion of the Jewish community who believes this way, or you figure out where there are areas of commonality. For instance, we can all agree that we want to fight anti-Semitism, I hope. So you don't need, if there's an attack against somebody, we can all agree that it's a very, simplistic issue. I don't mean to simplify it, but that is just to define that is bad, that is wrong, and something needs to be done. So you got to find the areas of commonality, but you can't understand where those areas are unless you understand what all the areas are that actually exist. So we want to make sure to open your mind to what that world looks like and what you're up against when you're advocating. Just for a small moment of levity, we end up, making sure that you're all breaking bread together, and we have, and we have dinner. These seminars are over. We do over dinner. So a couple of years ago, we ended up having, people, getting anxious about which kind of what we were serving for dinner from week to week. So we decided, well, it's a good lesson in politics. We started every week. We do a doodle poll with a couple of options. So let you guys politic each other and figure it out. So nobody can blame me for what you guys are ordering. We actually last year had a chicken faction and a sushi faction having to battle it out. But it also builds the relationships between you and your peers. It gives you something else to talk about to build those incredible relationships. Also, we have in the program certain special events. What I mean by that is like, for instance, last summer when there was some hate crimes while the program was going on, we got the Brooklyn District Attorney to host the entire program in his office to actually speak directly. Because the Brooklyn District Attorney is, first of all, in Brooklyn is where some of those hate crimes had happened. And also they have a hate crime specific bureau, which is unique. So we ended up having everybody come and actually meet and speak to the district attorney to have those conversations on what that looks like. We also then were able to get the head of the Hate Crimes Bureau of NYPD to actually bring everybody into the precinct, into the task force, and meet with the detectives who are actually going after the perpetrators of those crimes, and explain what is an actual hate crime, what is the perception of a hate crime, or what is a hate crime. So when we have folks in the Jewish community, unfortunately, sometimes saying that a particular crime was a hate crime, how come it's not being charged as a hate crime? We don't understand, right? Well, part of the reason is, in a lot of ways, is because we need to understand how legally hate crimes are defined. And what we can do is either work within that framework, or we can recognize there are loopholes that need to be closed, and use this kind of opportunity to lobby whether it's the legislature, whichever legislature it is, to close those loopholes or to work on those issues. But we need to first understand those issues in order to know how to advocate on their behalf, or to know whether they're right or wrong, or to understand law enforcement's perspective on them. So it shows you that full world. We also have a third component of the program where we pair each intern with a mentor, who's somebody who is critical in the Jewish world in some way, shape, or form, that understands this world. So this way, you don't feel like you're on an island. But if you have a concern, if you have a question, there's somebody assigned to you who knows these kind of things, who you can reach out to. Also somebody there who can talk to you and say, hey, did you realize this? Did you understand this? Did you understand why this happened? Or maybe you want to bring this to your attention of your office. But somebody who's there for you to have those kind of conversations with, who are senior people throughout the Jewish communities regionally, who are involved and meshed in this kind of way. So for instance, even, we have, two Jewish New York State Supreme Court judges, who we always get people who are pre-law, who are always clamoring to get those as their mentors, because to be able to know that you have a personal relationship, with this New York State Supreme Court judge, at this stage in the game, at the college level, and that's something you don't otherwise get. And we try to teach how building those networks and building those relationships is critical. But it's also a question of by building those relationships, once you go back to campus, or once you go back to your community, you end up knowing that if you see something that needs to be dealt with, and you say to yourself oftentimes, I wish I had somebody that I can bounce ideas off of, or can help me get this thing done. Well, now you do. You have, besides the Wiesenthal family, you have your mentor who you've hopefully built that relationship with, who can help guide you and work with you and teach you. We also, about a year and a half ago, was how critical the networking component is. We built established an alumni association for the program. So now we actually have, for the past 8 cohorts or 8 years of the program, everybody getting together on a regular basis, or speak on a regular basis, to build the relationships, because people have been through this program, people who want to be advocates, people who want to be knowledgeable and get involved in these kinds of things, that are 5, 6, 7 years ahead of you, are already in a place that maybe they can help you, maybe they can guide you. We have one of our interns, for argument's sake, from a couple of years ago, who was actually the president of the Alumni Association. She was placed in the office of Letitia James when she was the New York City public advocate. Nobody, and she did such an incredible job and built such incredible relationships and kept up over the winter with her supervisors. And the next summer, that winter, Letitia James ended up running for Attorney General and winning. So the Attorney General doesn't take, and she was pre-law, but she was going into her senior year at Cornell. And the Attorney General's office, usually only takes, students who are in law school for interns. But she wanted one, and she spoke to her folks, and we helped her out. And she was the only non-law school student to get it in the Attorney General's office to get an internship. Now, 2 years later, the Attorney General actually reached out to her, and her people reached out to her and hired her, and she's working in the public integrity unit of the New York State Attorney General's office. So think about that. From this program, when we want people from our community in all kinds of places, people running those kind of offices are people that came out of this program, are people that understand our community. And we've had many instances like that. We have, for instance, just so many of the mentors and so many of the people, end up building those kind of relationships. So also just from, a housekeeping perspective, at the successful conclusion of the program, you get a $1,500 stipend. I can't speak for YU in this because I'm not sure how it works in YU, but there are a host of colleges that through whatever programs you're in sometimes do provide course credit also sometimes, but that's for each, that's not something we do. That's something everybody looks, and see if that's something that the college does or not. But if there are things that we need to do to help in sometimes signing documents or doing evaluations or whatnot, we're happy to help out if that's something that schools offer. We've really built a family over the last 8 years here of next generation leadership and next generation advocates, that is second to none. And one of the things that we see now, even through our alumni association, if you ask folks, where can you go to find, 100 or 150 people who have gone through this kind of training that are from our community, that are smart, that are knowledgeable, and that are capable and competent, right? Good luck getting an answer to that question. So when legislators or other Jewish organizations at this point look to hire at those levels, they're asking us right away, can we circulate, their job descriptions to our alumni before they even go anywhere else? We had, an assembly person just this week ask us to circulate 2 positions in her office to our alumni association first. When I was lobbying for budget to an assembly member last summer, and we had the meeting on Zoom, I see a smirk on her face as we're lobbying, and she goes, "Wow, I think I should bring in my budget director for this." And all of a sudden, she brings in her budget director, who was a graduate of our program. So we're seeing people have a real impact and really pick up great relationships and pick up great things here. So I think I've covered quite a bit. So I'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts, hear your questions. What are questions from anybody about the program? Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate you coming on a Friday. And yes, definitely hear about the whole being in the same time zone being super helpful. Recently did a couple of interviews where people were in different time zones, and that made things extremely complicated. So thank you. Okay, so you shared a lot. I do have a couple questions. I'll start first with the housekeeping side of things, and then move on to a little bit more about the program.
Sure.
So I'm actually graduating this coming semester. I am, graduating as an accounting major.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure that the Simon Wiesenthal program is still applicable for me.
Because, so it's open to undergrad and graduate students. So we've had graduate students as well, or we've had people graduating. It's actually funny. What we found actually very successful is that I already know from experience in this program, which elected officials have had a larger history of trying to hire our interns after the program. So I know our graduating seniors that might be looking for jobs after. Strategically, I know I can place them in one of those places. Obviously, somebody has to leave for a position to be open. But there are places that we've had plenty of people who have come as seniors who just graduated, and both to build the network, and a number of them have been hired.
Okay.
So the answer is yes.
Right, that's amazing. I was also wondering if the stipend is the complete compensation for the program, or will I be getting paid by the campaign as well, or in some other avenue as well? Because $1,500 for 2 weeks, it covers not much more than rent in New York City.
Well, the program is about an 8.5 week program. It's not 2 weeks.
I meant 2 months. My mistake.
But no, $1,500 is the overall compensation.
Okay. Fine. Thank you for clarifying. So one of the things that's most interesting to me is within the YU community, there's a lot of diversity, in the sense within the Jewish community, but in the outer world, not so much. So I was wondering how within the Simon Wiesenthal program, what is the classic spectrum that you anticipate being in the program, and how do you prevent conflict? Because a lot of times, two Jews, three opinions, and
So
why.
So I was saying, you meant, so I understand you. So you meant diversity within the program, or diversity that the program opens you to in the offices or places that you're in.
Program, like, do you have people from the Hasidic community, from the non-Orthodox community, from the Yeshivish community, from, let's say, the Reform Conservative, or is it predominantly diversity within the modern Orthodox community?
It's diversity within the full spectrum of the Jewish community. So I'll give you an example. Last year we had a kid who was in Baruch who was a Lubavitch Chassid. And it's actually funny. We put him in the office of Farah Lewis, who is a Haitian council member who actually represents parts of Crown Heights. And it ended up becoming such an incredible experience for both of them that even though he didn't graduate, she hired him part-time right after the program because she thought how incredible it was, where he's still working. So, but by the same token, last year we had, one student who would sit next to him, who was from Northern Florida. And we all know when we talk about, the Jewish community in Florida, we all think of Miami, Boca, Hollywood, et cetera. But he was from St. Augustine, Florida, and where I did not know there was a Jewish community. And the reason I didn't know that is because there isn't any. And he was saying to me in his interview that, he went up there because his father was a professor in the university up there. And they always felt very passionate about their Judaism. They weren't religious really at all. They couldn't even put a minyan together, up there. But they would try to have, Friday night dinner and bring whatever the 3 or 4 or 5 Jewish neighbors there. And if they were able to put something together, for the high holidays, they usually were able to. But there was really, he felt that he wanted to be part of this because he felt he wanted to become more connected to the Jewish world, not necessarily the religious world, but the Jewish world. But he had absolutely, no background other than knowing that his parents believed that his Judaism, was a critical component to his life that he wanted to grow on. I'll never forget. We had, it's going back a few years. This is a funny story, and this is why when we would go around the room at each seminar. So we had two people who we both put in. It was a larger. I was in I think it was in the Manhattan Borough President's office, if I remember correctly. And the two of them were totally different. I actually think one of them was a YU student, and the other one was from North Jersey. That was from a very traditional background. The one who was from the traditional background was also a very outgoing, boisterous kind of personality. The other student was a much more quiet person. And they decided, they built a relationship in that office and learned from each other just by hanging out together in their work. And they ended up, I remember one time coming to the session and talking about how they got out a little early and they decided they were going to walk the 2 miles to the seminar instead of hopping on the subway or whatever it was, and they were going to walk together. And as they're walking, they were passing through the Lower East Side, and the YU student ends up saying, "Oh, here's they passed the Bailey Stocker shul," and he said, "Oh, I'm passing a shul. I got to catch mincha. Do you mind if I go in for a few minutes?" And he goes, "Let me come with you. I've never been in a shul like that. And all of a sudden they were talking about how they were learning from each other just by hanging out together. So you're talking about the diversity within the Jewish world that we have. I interviewed somebody yesterday who's from Atlanta, who said she was only 2 Jews in her high school, and had no idea how to defend against anti-Israel sentiment in her school because she never had the community around her. But by the same token, yesterday I also, interviewed an Orthodox girl from Touro College who grew up in a frum community. So yes, the diversity within the Jewish world there is very much a part of this program. Yes.
That all sounds so incredible. Thank you. It's nice to be able to ask all of the questions that I have. So what are the expected opportunities? Like you shared that, someone went to Letitia James' office before she was elected officially, and like a couple different, city council members, state assemblymen. What are the opportunities that I can expect, or that you anticipate being like? Have you been in contact with anyone? What level of choice is there within, from the students' end of things, or is it that you're assigned a government member?
So oftentimes I scare people when they ask that, and I say, no, I have a dartboard, and we just, see where you land. But no, but in actuality,
That's Shem's hands.
but in actuality, we have very significant relationships, with the elected officials, throughout the region, and we know what their personalities are, what their office structure, what their offices are like, what the people in their offices are like. We know from a political spectrum, where their heads are at. And when we interview our students that we accept, we do that so we also get to know them a little bit better and can understand where they would fit. So there are a lot of things we take into consideration. Geography is one of them. For instance, if somebody lives in Westchester, I'm not putting them in office in Staten Island. So geography is one of the real factors. It's also a question of trying to make sure we want to make sure that you're out of your comfort zone a little bit, so you learn something, but we don't want to put you in a place that you're going to feel so uncomfortable that you're not going to be happy or learn something. So we balance, how do we put you in a position that you are a little out of your comfort zone, but to a degree that's appropriate. Also to try to figure out, based on, like, for instance, if you're graduating, I know that there are some offices that have a little bit of a higher turnover that would probably be looking more than some others. So I know I want to put you in a place that I think you'd have a bigger opportunity to shine. And also what we do is what we say in the orientation that we have also is that it's also a question of, you have a lot of opportunity here to go above and beyond. And it's a question of, from you personally, how you take advantage of that situation. I'll give you an example. One of the things that led to a lot of the pieces of my career, when I was a very young staffer on Capitol Hill, I was a little unusual in the fact that I was an Orthodox Jew working for a senior member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and to me, I felt at that point that I didn't want to just preach to the choir in our own community necessarily. That I thought, in order for us to be more effective, we needed to open up our eyes to more communities, and to make sure that they understood who we are and we understood who they were. It was an incredible experience. But what I did was, this was back in the late 90s, I ended up, Ehud Barak had just gotten elected prime minister, so I'm dating myself a little bit. The member I was on the international relations committee, and was asking me a lot of questions about Israeli government and this and that. And I said, listen, can you imagine what the rest of the caucus is asking also? Why don't we put together a Black Jewish Relations Conference on Capitol Hill to talk about these issues and talk about how we bring the communities together who have a historical relationship together? And long story short, he allowed me to go forward. He ended up asking me at that point to ask John Lewis, who I'm sure you've heard of, to co-sponsor with us, which allowed me to build a relationship with John Lewis. But I could have just done my my regular day-to-day. But I pushed forward on coming up with an idea for a conference, putting it together, building a relationship with the members of Congress, inviting presidents of all major Jewish organizations throughout the country, and building those relationships, getting national media about it, and getting noticed all over the place. Now, I could have very well been a successful person in my office, just sitting and doing my daily grind, but I wanted so much more, and I figured out how to respectfully and appropriately do it. You have those opportunities here, but it's for you to take advantage of to a degree. We had an individual who, in 2019, was working for Rebecca Seawright, who was an assembly person on the Upper East Side, and there was a lot of anti-Semitic, incidents happening. At one of the sessions that we had, one of the other members from Brooklyn said, "Oh, my member is putting together a forum on anti-Semitism," and she comes to me afterwards saying, "Don't you think that we should be doing that on the Upper East Side as well?" I said, "Did you speak to your mentor?" Her mentor said, "Absolutely. Why don't you go ask your chief of staff first? So you're going up the proper chain of command and figure it out." She pitches the chief of staff. The chief of staff brings her right into Rebecca Seawright. Rebecca Seawright connects her to some people and says, "Go for it. You're in charge. This is your new program." And she put together herself the press, the community outreach, the people, the speakers, which we helped her get, but put together a major forum on anti-Semitism on the Upper East Side of Manhattan as a member of this program. But she needed to be able to, on her own, say, I'm going to do more than the minimum. I'm going to do more than just check a box in this. I want to learn. I want to be a part of this, and I want to make a difference. So those opportunities are all over the place in this program. But part of it is also, and we help guide you to show you where those opportunities are. But those are things that also it's part of realizing who you are and how aggressive you want to be and how you want to learn and take advantage of those opportunities and positions that you have.
That sounds amazing, and I would love to connect afterwards at some point to discuss a little bit more about my background. Not so comfortable doing it on a recorded session.
Sure.
So my next question is, you talk a lot about what you're looking for and the results of the program, but you don't discuss so much about how to get into the program. So can I ask a little bit more details? Like, what are you looking for? What impresses you when you look at students, when you're interviewing students from Chabad and Baruch to, from Girl and Turo? What are things that you think make someone a good fit for the program? And what are red flags that you see with people who do apply to the program?
Sure. I mean, I want to see people who come off to me as, I want to make a difference. I want to be involved. I want to play a leadership role. And I don't know how, but I'm willing to learn. I want to see people typically, one of the key questions I ask usually in interviews is, what are the things that you're involved with in your community, on campus? You want to kind of see that, and it doesn't matter what you're involved in, but you want to see that from a beyond just getting good grades perspective on a transcript, that you've demonstrated a desire to be involved in things that are larger than that, whatever that might be. We have one person who interviewed who is on like every athletic team possible in her college and all those things. You know what the fact is that person is willing to fight for what that person wanted, and the fact that there's a fight in that person, the fact that there's passion in that person, the fact that that person says, I'm here and want to make a difference and I want to learn how to do that, and is able to articulate that, that matters a lot to me. Because I don't come in with the expectation of you having government experience and knowing how to do this, because if you did, you wouldn't be, you wouldn't be wanting to be part of a program to learn. But I want to see that it's something that was of interest to you, something that you understand that there's a larger world, whether it's something you want to go into professionally or not, that just being a part of any community, that it's important to have people who understand the fundamentals of how do we make sure that the needs of the Jewish community, however you define that, are met. It could be, how you fight, for your local JCC, how you fight for your local shul, how you fight for your local school, how you, whatever's, when there's anti-Semitism in your backyard, to not be somebody who's willing to say, somebody else will take care of it. I want the kind of person who says, yes, we need to figure this out. We need to do something. And my responsibility is to teach you how to do that.
That's incredible. Just, my yearbook quote is going to be, it is what it is, but is it what it could be? So, I think I'm looking forward to talking with you more on that front.
You should look at the famous Bobby Kennedy line of some people look at the world the way things are and ask why. I look at the world the way things could be and ask why not.
Exactly. Okay.
And I'll say this as we're going down the road of sayings. That when I first met with John Lewis and pitched him on the conference, I'll never forget. He put his hand on my shoulder, and even though it was originally a line stolen from MLK, he looked at me in the eye and said, son, I'll be happy to join because we all came here on different ships, but we're all in the same boat.
Incredible.
So from an application process, I'm assuming you have access to the application, right?
On the YU program, yes.
Okay.
I already have all the applications. I already spoke with faculty about recommendation letters. Thankfully, I'm very involved in student campus, so there were actually a couple of jokes, like, okay, I'm going to fight that my recommendation letter is going to be the one. So it's a good position to be in.
So what I would just say is because we are getting close to the deadline. Get in whatever you have. Even if you get it in piecemeal, this way we can put you in the interview queue and keep you in our accounts, because it is a very competitive program to get into. But I like a lot of what I'm seeing and hearing from you. So I just want to make sure that just so we know that you're on our lists. So even if you call in and say, I have this, I'll get the rest of it in in a couple of days. At least we know we have a file for you.
And thank you. So happy to hear the interest. I just want to confirm that even though I'm an accounting major, right, I'm not quite a poli-sci, pre-public health, or many of the other pre-law majors. I'm definitely planning on going into law school, but I just got accepted at Deloitte, so they actually have a program where after a couple of years, thank you. They do look into law school potentially if that's something that you're interested in continuing your education. But I just wanted to make sure that I'm not going to be necessarily doing a bookkeeping role. I'm going to be more of the inner office role.
There is no bookkeeping role. There's no dollars coming into an elected official's office, and if there is, then we got bigger problems.
Okay, perfect. Good to know.
There's also one thing you said earlier, just to make sure to clarify, is you mentioned something. I just remember you mentioned the word campaign. So we're not working with the campaigns of these officials. You're working in their government offices. As not-for-profits, we can't be involved in their campaigns, and I mean, we tell interns, if they end up asking you beyond the scope of this program, if you want to be involved in our campaign and you want to do it and volunteer or whatever it is, God bless. But that's not something that institutionally we have any role in or doing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's all my questions for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to answering all of them so in depth. Really appreciate that. And do you have any questions for me? Like, I'm just curious, like, what are things that you wish that students would ask you?
Well, I always look for people who ask me questions, sort of like the one you did about what else can I do? How do I rise above? The kind of questions where you want to see people, strategically in their minds, trying to say, how can I distinguish myself? How can I do more? And that was a question that you did ask. So, those are my wife still, gets angry at me for the insane hours I put in after still doing this after 25 or so years. But the reality is that, the old saying of you want something done, give it to a busy person. We want people who are not afraid of hard work, not afraid of understanding that in order to make a difference, it doesn't come easy. But the rewards that you get, and what you look back on and how you've made a difference in this world is worth every last second. So we want people who have a passion for wanting to be a part of something larger.
I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you.
Sounds great. Are there any other questions or everybody? Okay. I guess that I look forward to hopefully seeing your application as soon as possible. And for anybody else who wants to apply, as I believe YU has the application connected, and I'm happy to answer questions. Anybody, if people have questions next week that we're not able to make the session and hear the recording, they can email me at mcohen@wiesenthal.com, or I know your offices have my office's email where we can schedule any conversations as well. So happy to keep an open line. YU in this program, we've always had a great relationship. We've always had we've always had YU students in our different cohorts, and they've done very well. So we look forward to that relationship continuing, and to helping together with an incredible institution such as YU to together partner in building our next generation's leaders.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Michael, for coming and speaking with our students. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to record this as well for those who couldn't make it. And with that, Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful weekend.
Michael, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Nice to meet everybody.
Take care.
Take care.